recently there's been talk about Donald Trump getting himself thrown into jail. And there's a David Pakman piece that actually puts this together pretty well. I wanted to add some commentary on this and share sort of my thoughts on how likely I think this is, and give some thoughts onto specifically this. But let's first listen to David here, and then we'll give some reaction to it. Here we go.
Detention. What is going on here? Listen to this. Yesterday, we spoke about Donald Trump's threats being made. Yes, to the special prosecutor, Jack Smith, but more generally to people who are involved in one way or another with Trump's prosecution. And Trump was told not to communicate with witnesses, which he is now doing through social media in multiple ways. Let's remind ourselves of what was said. Donald Trump posting to Truth Social in all capital letters, quote, "If you go after me, I'm coming after you."
Keep in mind, where we're going with this is implying that Donald Trump making these arguments on Truth Social or otherwise is somehow going to land him in jail because, a judge basically told him don't threaten anyone. Personally, I think that's highly unlikely, and a lot of what Donald Trump is saying is, in my opinion, a way of sort of rallying his base, right? It's a way of motivating people to vote and be engaged in the election, not as a direct threat. That's not to say that Donald Trump doesn't engage, obviously, in like legal activities or lawsuits, but generally courts don't look at lawsuits as ways of threats or harassments. Unless you have a frivolous lawsuit, in which case that gets thrown out. But arguing, something as what we just saw, if you go after me, I'm coming after you. I think it's probably a stretch to call this, something that's going to throw Donald Trump in jail, but you should see the basis of the argument, because these sorts of ideas are getting a lot of attention right now, and people are suggesting that, hey, maybe Donald Trump could end up going to jail, and he'll end up getting, instead of a jail cell, some kind of private jail, like a, Martha Stewart-style jail, or maybe detention at Mar-a-Lago, or they'll build a prison for him, and those walls will be built faster than his wall between America and Mexico. The American taxpayer will pay for this one. So much drama going on. Let's just listen to a little bit more here.
As I told you yesterday, this led to the Department of Justice filing for a protective order. There was an initial timeline for that. Trump asked for an extension. The judge said no, and we're still figuring out how that's going to finally get adjudicated. In the meantime, Donald Trump went back on Truth Social, and this time talked about Mike Pence, posting, quote, "Wow, it's finally happened. Little Mike Pence, a man who was about to be ousted as governor of Indiana until I came along and made him VP, has gone to the dark side. I never told a newly emboldened, not based on his 2% poll numbers, Pence, to put me above the Constitution, or that Mike was too honest. He's delusional. And now he wants to show he's a tough guy.
This, by the way, is because there were some reports that came out that Donald Trump said, Pence is too honest. And this all has to do with basically J6, right? Donald Trump encouraging Mike Pence not to certify the results of the election, which obviously J6 sought to interrupt. I covered J6 live in, a now archived live stream that's still available, by the way. Just type into YouTube, Meet Kevin January 6th riot or insurrection. I can't remember what the title is. And it's a 10-hour live stream where we basically watched everything unfold. It's almost like its own little documentary if you look at the timestamps. But, Pence obviously went on to certify the results of the election despite expectations that maybe he would listen to Trump but not certify the results of the election. But anyway, we'll keep going with this Truth Social post.
Once read a major magazine article on Mike. It said he was not a very good person. I was surprised, but the article was right. Sad. This is related to reports that Pence's testimony might be a big factor in Trump's trials, an article I just showed you in the last segment. This goes directly counter to what the judge told Trump to do as far as the pretrial conditions. The Washington Post has an extensive article about what happened in the courtroom last week. And it says, quote, "Next, the judge tells Trump he may not communicate with any witness about the facts of the case without an attorney present." Quote from the judge now, "I want to remind you, it is a crime to intimidate a witness or retaliate against anyone for providing information about your case to the prosecution or otherwise obstruct justice. Do you understand these warnings, sir? And Trump nodded, but he didn't say anything, which led to the judge to say, having heard these conditions, are you prepared to comply with them? Trump stands, right hand in the air, agrees to comply with the conditions of release. Trump is directly violating that instruction here. Trump is responding to Mike Pence on the basis of Mike Pence's believed previous and potential future participation in this case as a witness. This is arguably a form of communicating with witnesses, and I would argue even attempting to tamper with them or influence them. And
all right, so that's Dave Pakman's argument. Obviously, we know Dave Pakman. I enjoy his videos. I think we know Dave Pakman leans on the left compared to conservative talk shows, would obviously lean right. Point here is not to point bias. It's to suggest that I think the argument that, you know, a judge saying, hey, look, you're not allowed to talk to any witnesses without an attorney present is pretty easily countered by Donald Trump simply suggesting, I've always got an attorney present, which in reality is true. The argument that I made months ago was that Donald Trump would really use campaign funds to make sure that he's always as legally equipped as need be. Donald Trump has previously made the argument that he would only use 1 penny out of every dollar raised towards legal funding. That has since been revised to 90 cents going towards campaign funds, 10 cents going towards Donald Trump's legal battles. Donald Trump's campaign is in effect one way to subsidize the legal bag he would be held with if he were not running for office. Imagine this for a moment. Like Trump or not, imagine this for a moment. If Donald Trump did not run for office, he would still be left with the legal bag of all of the costs of his legal battles from his last administration and subsequent campaign. Well, if now you run for president, at least you have a way of compensating for some of those past legal actions, which otherwise you wouldn't have had. But this is no surprise. Do I think that Donald Trump is going to somehow be pre-trial detained because he's shouting on social media? No, because I think that if the judge actually expected to restrain Donald Trump's speech on social media, the judge would have specifically said, Donald Trump, you frequently complain on social media or at your rallies about your opponents. If you do that again, you're in violation of this court order. That's very different from witness intimidation or witness tampering. And so I think the judge very clearly worded this to make sure they would not have to throw Donald Trump in jail because of some, pre-trial commentary. Everybody knows Donald Trump is going to be a loose cannon at his rallies and on Truth Social, and quite frankly, that's just part of the entertainment of it all. So no, I do not personally think there's a chance in hell Donald Trump gets thrown into jail, certainly not in a pre-trial detention measure or on some form of flight risk argument. Is there a chance, obviously, after the outcome of all of these cases? Of course there is, but pre, I don't think so. That's one of my takes. So, that's my response to, will Donald Trump be thrown into jail? Okay, somebody here is responding and saying, so is yelling fire in a crowded theater okay? That's very different from this. You have to, I mean, it's a fair question, but let's set it up fairly. Let's say you went into a movie theater and every single day there was a dude at the bottom of the theater yelling, fire, fire. People would show up at the movie theater to watch the person yelling fire because maybe they like the person or they think it's a funny show. But they wouldn't be thinking there's actually a fire, right? So, I think you have to frame that analogy better. Now, I want you to know this. When it comes to AI, time is what's going to make you money. And if you can prove that value to an employer, you'll always be able to be employed. So this is another way of making sure that you don't get replaced by artificial intelligence. If you can master AI by starting on the ground floor, let's go.